So, last but not least, Elektra from Greece will talk about LARP as a tool for personal development and psychotherapy. Boy, don't we all need it. Here you go.
Hi. It was not meant to be such a fun presentation, but I'll try to make it fun, not for you, but for me not to fall asleep. I will try. Okay, so LARP as a tool for personal development and psychotherapy. Let's start with a very easy question. How many of you could tell me what is the difference between personal development and psychotherapy?
Psychotherapy, you get professional help, I guess.
Hmm?
Personal development, you work on yourself.
Kind of. Kind of.
Development, is it like life coaching and those kind of things?
It could be. It could be. Something else? Covered? Okay. Let's see some definitions. Okay, so psychotherapy, as you said, is the use of psychological methods to help a person either change behavior or overcome problems in desired way, and it's a process that is being made by a professional of mental health. Could be a psychologist, psychotherapy, psychiatrist, etc. So it's basically a treatment of what we could refer to as issues or disorders through specific methods that could be very traditional, like, you know, sitting on chairs opposite to each other, or even, you know, the classic Freudian couch, all these settings that you may have seen in a movie. Or it can be also very innovative, using, you know, art methods and various other, you know, alternative, let's say, techniques. Whereas personal development is a far more wide process that can also happen in psychotherapy, but it can also happen literally anywhere. So what is it? It's the conscious pursuit of personal growth by expanding self-awareness and knowledge and improving personal skills. So that basically can cover activities of any kind. Like, you can develop yourself personally by watching a movie, by reading a book, by having an interesting talk with your friends. Actually, I would argue that anything we do in life can be a source of personal development. So I want to talk a little bit about, first, about personal development through LARP, even if the LARP itself was not designed for this purpose. So, I want to ask you, like, you are, most of you, very experienced LARPers, and you've taken part in all sorts of LARPs. Have you felt that you experienced personal growth through LARP, even if the purpose of the LARP was not that at all? Does anyone want to share some experience that was significant to him or her? And that would require a second microphone, which I don't know. Okay. And if you could pass it around, that would be helpful, because I don't know where Miroslav is.
No problem. So first of all, let's start with the basic one. Whenever we went for a few days of LARPing, my camping skills improved because of that, even though that was not the goal of the LARP by any means necessary. So definitely that one.
Someone else?
Well, for me it was, as a person who doesn't handle very well new situations that I encounter without preparation. For me, when I started participating in LARP, I set it to myself as a sort of a personal challenge. Like, I'm going to do this, I have no idea what awaits me, and I'm going to be surrounded by people I never met before. So, since I was able to do that, It greatly improved my confidence to also approach other situations in life in the same way.
That's great to hear. Someone else?
It may not look that way, but I'm pretty antisocial. I can stay home for days on end. Before, I couldn't talk to people. First thing that helped me was Dungeons and Dragons. After that, obligatory army service actually helped me to talk to people that aren't in my niche. And then when I discovered LARPs and forests, I could go for days. Now I'm completely safe at being in a room with 20, 50 unknown people and interacting with all of them. It just works, so really helps.
Unrelated to LARP, but I'm glad to hear that the army helped someone in some way.
So once for a LARP, I had to play an NPC role as a hermit that's giving quests to people when they come to his hut in the forest. So I had to actually construct the hut in the forest, and it was standing there for a week. And this week happened a couple of times, and I actually found myself so, gaining from this. I sit in the nature forest around, and I'm listening to the sounds, and I'm waiting until the nature speaks to me. Of course, it doesn't speak to me, but nothing else speaks to me, and it's just silence around, and it's cooling me down. And unfortunately, whenever that LARP is over, I cannot sit in the hut in the forest anymore, because I'm also an accountant in an NGO, and it takes time. But even I cannot use the hermit's hut anymore. It's still, I remember that once I had it, and once that the accountancy is getting like explosions, you can go mentally to the hut, and that's my growth and my benefits. So the hut, it kind of stays there all the time.
So cute.
Well, for years I've had a bit of a stage fright. Like talking to about this many people was like, God, I'm going to mumble something. LARP helped a great deal.
Okay. I will go on just for time management's sake. So I tried to magically anticipate what some of you may say, and I did this list. So I think that personal development through LARP can happen in many ways, and some of them are getting to know ourselves better. I can give you an example for that since Daniel is here, just to pay my tributes once again. So Daniel was my first GM ever. Thank you. And so he gave me this character that had to manipulate everyone and lie to everyone and trick everyone. And once I read the character, I said, there's no fucking way I can do that. This is not me. But guess what? It was me. Yeah. So I got to know a little bit more about myself. Maybe I didn't like what I got to know about myself, but it was something new. So also, we can become more creative and innovative, and also better at problem solving, because a lot in LARP has to do with problem solving, even if we're not talking about the totally gamistic LARPs, with the objectives and so on. Also, as many of you have touched in previous presentation and discussions, it gives us a sense of community, even for 2 hours. And it can improve our social and communication skills, and also our teamworking skills. Empathy. Empathy is a tool that I think that good LARP cannot exist without. Like, you get a character sheet, and that character is not you. In order to be able to play that character, you need to feel a bit of empathy for that character and get into this character's shoes. Exploration of different ways of behaving and expressing, for example, manipulation for me. And also exploration of different values, beliefs, and ideologies. It can also help us understand and handle better the physical world and objects. And I'm not only talking camping skills, for example, here, but bear in mind that there are people who actually have, let's say, not motor disabilities, but their capabilities of interacting with the physical world in many ways are not the same as most of us in this room have and consider, take it for granted. Artistic skills, I think it's a big chapter in LARPs in many ways and many forms of art. So we're talking about a holistic development that can appear in the physical, mental, emotional, creative, and social dimensions. Would you agree? Okay, so I don't need to argue about that, I can move on. I found this quote that I really liked. LARP is a medium of personal, direct experience. The things that happen in a LARP happen specifically to you, and that makes it inevitably a transformative experience, which can also apply to life, but we're talking about LARP here. Now, how does that happen? Okay, this is the image that we all had in our presentation. I can say to you we didn't copy it from each other, it's just an image that we found all in the net and it was good. So you all are familiar with this. I won't explain again what is bleed and what is the alibi, but I will try to explain the alibi and the magic circle from a psychological point of view, hopefully without boring you too much. So, primary identity and character. So here we are our ordinary selves. Maybe, I don't know, maybe even the people in this room have from time to time experienced, let's say, some difficulties when dealing, with issues, events in our lives, etc. Many, if not all, of the issues that we encounter is because we cannot psychologically process all the stimuli and all the experiences that occur in our lives. For many reasons that I will not, go into too much detail right now, if, for example, I consciously experienced everything that goes on in my life, I would probably go mad, to put it very scientifically. We would all be in mental hospitals because the human psyche cannot take that. The goal of psychotherapy, which also links to personal growth, is that step by step, not in two big leaps, because they can be traumatic, you expand your field of perception by being able to incorporate more things into your self-image. And the alibi can do that, because maybe I cannot stand being manipulative as Elektra, but I can stand being manipulative as my character. And maybe, if I think about it, and if I have a good debriefing, thank you, Daniel, I can incorporate this new information about my character into myself without this traumatizing me. Do I make sense, or do you... Okay, so it was understandable, I'm glad. Okay, maybe. And of course, if anyone is interested in hearing more about this, there are many psychological theories that I will not quote now, but you can ask me later and I will elaborate. So the bleed phenomenon is again how this all happens. And the bleed phenomenon, whereas in recreational LARP we usually treat it as a bad thing that we need to find ways to manage and avoid, in psychotherapeutic LARP, or LARP for personal development, is actually something that we're aiming at. It's a tool. But only under the condition that it is contextualized through debriefing. Because if you let that bleed just be, and don't address it, don't talk about it, don't discuss it at all, it can be very traumatizing, very toxic, and it will not help at all. So again, debriefing, debriefing, debriefing. No, I will make a small parenthesis because I asked you before LARP regardless of the purpose why it was made. So there are many purposes of a LARP being created. Like it can be for recreation, which is maybe the most common one. It can be art. It can be education, political. It can be a method of research. We haven't talked about it, I think, during the PoRtaL, but it's also something really innovative. And it also can be psychotherapy and personal development. Now, I think that all of us can understand that there is a big overlapping of purposes. Okay, no matter what your initial goal was in your mind when you started designing a LARP, I think that inevitably you will touch on other fields as well. Now, they are not always clearly distinguishable. Entertainment purposes do not exclude everything else. You can have many elements in a recreational LARP. And the thing is, I argue that because of that, personal development is a common ground between all purposes and all kinds of LARP. And for this reason, while we are designing LARPs, regardless the purpose, we should be aware of this overlapping so that we know what to do about it when what the player gains out of the LARP is actually totally different to what we had in mind in the first place. Because it can happen, and it's something that also Zbigniew touched a little bit upon in his presentation. Now, to move a little bit to the more formal parts, like the real psychotherapy. Has anyone participated in a LARP that was designed especially for this purpose? Nina, do you want to share?
Well, during the whole Biennale thing in 2018, yeah, there was this Blackbox Lab aimed at 15 people. I think it was in a late prototyping stage, was almost finished. Yeah, something like that. The idea is that it would have to touch upon refugees and that kind of crisis, but it was a black box LARP, meaning we just had one big, literally black room, and there was just a line of tape that was the borders between two countries, and each time there were like 7 people in each country, and we would have like these totally symbolic items that would be used to actually make us feel like some kind of daily ritual.
Recreate the routine of everyday life.
Yeah, we were actually left alone. We had like something like a half LARP, half workshop. We'd have to find out through the workshops how to actually deal with them because they were totally symbolic. And the fun part of it, we weren't allowed to talk. We were not actually using any kind of verbal communication, not even grunts, not even sounds, anything. We were only allowed to use very specific hand gestures, which had a very specific meaning, and they were actually created from each culture / group / country, and they were not common with the other one. And the bonus was that we all had to have the same basic things like yes, no, happy, angry, sad, aggressive, defensive. And each country had one extra that they developed on the spot without the other country knowing. So good luck with language. And finally, to wrap this up, we would actually play an entire daily routine from the morning we woke up until the evening, which was simulated by closing the lights and actually going to sleep on a bunch of pillows all together, communally. And at the end of the first night, somebody was missing from one group and into another. And he couldn't actually, he couldn't actually get what the other people were talking about. He couldn't get what the people were doing. It was totally different to him. And the newcomer had to adjust to this, and the people there had to adjust to him, and then more each night would appear. But the guy who was in first would be totally different to the guys who were now, like a second generation. So in a very, like 4 hours, no talking, nothing that would actually relate to what we're used to, LARPs and gaming, or even discussing whatsoever. It was a totally, I don't know, I almost cried.
There was a lot of crying. It's not always like this in LARPs for psychotherapy, though. Don't be afraid. Okay. So, let me tell you a little bit about how does it work so that you maybe gain an image in your head, although you haven't participated in one. So, from, the first impression, it doesn't look any different from any other LARP. Like, setting rules, scenario, characters, NPCs, playtime, downtime, de-rolling, debriefing. The usual stuff, but not exactly the same. So, what are the differences or the particularities? When it comes to the setting needs to serve the purposes of the alibi. So we don't choose the setting based on what will have cooler costumes or if we are bored of fantasy and would want to go into steampunk. It's what kind of a world would provide the best alibi for the situation that the sentimental and experiential situation that I'm trying to provoke in the participants. Same goes to the scenario or the plot, however you want to see it. So it should be either a direct mirroring of the situation that I want to address and the theme I would like to immerse, or it should be facilitating and enabling it in some way to, come to the surface. Now, the rules, of course, they should be as simple as possible, I would say, because again, we're not talking about power gaming here, we're talking about people who want to address some specific issues, but there should be even more special focus on consent and emotional safety. If, we were talking about this when it comes to, recreational LARPs, I cannot, stress how important it is when we're going into this field. And the props should be just focus on immersion. We want immersion, we want the deepest immersion that we can get, and if we need props for that, that's cool, but we're not focusing on the cool photos anymore. Then, when it comes to the characters, first of all. So, the characters could either be created by the players with, a workshop or some special guidance for the players to create them, or many times they are assigned to them, but not randomly. We don't do that in psychotherapeutic LARP. No. We should have some method, some method of assigning the appropriate character to the appropriate person. This usually can be a questionnaire that we hand out to the participants before the game. And the sooner the better. I'm not talking like 2 hours before the game, I'm talking 2 weeks before the game. There are many tools that one can use for this. Again, I can give you more details if you would like. Zbigniew has also mentioned some of them. Now, NPCs, very important here. The NPCs are essentially not only NPCs, they are facilitators in a psychotherapeutic process. It would be excellent if they had some background in this. This is not 100% necessary if they are briefed very well, but the GM needs to have training in psychotherapy. Don't try this at home in any other way. It will traumatize you more than the players. I'm not kidding. And also, apart from the GM being trained in psychotherapy, there should be an additional emotional safety regulator or arbiter, in-game or off-game, doesn't matter, because you don't want the GM having to go off-game all the time because someone needs him. You need to have a person whose only job is to focus on that, so that the GM can focus on the game as a psychotherapeutic process that he needs to lead. Then, when it comes to playtime and downtime, we're usually talking about one-off events for many reasons, some of them practical and some of them having to do with what exactly is our target group, like what issues do we want to address through the LARP. Now, If we have campaigns, if we choose to have campaigns for some reason, let's say that it's an ongoing psychotherapy group that meets, every couple of weeks or every month in a specific setting, we should pay a lot of attention on downtime. No downtime. Or if there is a downtime, it should be controlled. Because like even in recreational LARPs, I think we've all seen how much damage downtime can do, downtime events, can do to a LARP and how much toxicity this can trigger. Of course, we don't want this here. Also, during the game, even if it's quite short, like 1.5 hours or 2 hours, it's very useful to have off-game breaks. We're talking about people that maybe cannot take immersion for 1.5 hours. And of course, the emotional safety person always available at all times. Does this paint the picture a little bit? Cool. And maybe the most important thing, how to end the LARP. So, in most cases, we have talked about debriefing and its importance, but I want to also stress the importance of de-rolling in this case. Because even if, the 19-year-old player in the Boffer LARP, we've seen through many discussions that cannot necessarily, distinguish reality from the game and all the consequences that this has, just imagine, people that are challenged in some ways. They need to have a very serious and even time-consuming ritual and procedure to make sure that everyone is out of his role, that nothing from the role has stayed on them. They should, take it all off. And then we can have the debriefing. Because otherwise the debriefing doesn't make any sense, they're still in the role. Okay? I won't go to many details here because we talked about debriefing a lot, so I think I'm repeating other people. And what can we get through that? Actually, I would say the same things that we talked about when we were talking about personal development, just in a more focused and formal way. So I will not, again, go into many details here. Now, I've included some relevant theories and approaches from psychology. Don't worry, I will not analyze them all. I'm just giving you hints on things that you can look up, and I will just comment on a couple of them a little bit more. Some of them, psychodrama and social drama, they were developed by Jacob Moreno. They actually also played a role in the history of LARP itself, like they were a contributing stone in the development of LARP. So, I want to talk a little bit about drama therapy. You can find, all this relevant information in Phil Jones' book. So, Phil Jones is talking about 9 core processes for therapeutic purposes in drama therapy. I will go through them, explaining them very briefly. So, first of all is dramatic projection. Dramatic projection is that through the alibi that we said before, I project things that are within me in a dramatic way outside of me. So I take something from inside and I project it outside of me in the character, in the plot, in the game. Therapeutic performance process, that the performance in self can be totally therapeutic because of the expression. Drama therapeutic empathy and distancing. So drama and drama therapy in this case includes both empathy that we already talked about, but it also involves distancing. So I may empathize with the character that I'm playing, but I'd also distance myself from the character, which is a very magic paradox. So personification and impersonation. I become a person and I portray a person at the same time. Now, there's also a very important element of interactive witnessing, that all this process is not happening to me alone. There are other people there. And they are there to witness it and give me, either verbally or non-verbally, either consciously or unconsciously, feedback about it. The way that other players interact with me gives me feedback about how I'm playing. Embodiment, so using the body in this whole process. Playing can be therapeutic. We are adults that often forget how to play. Maybe not us in this room, generally. And now, this is a thing, also very important, life, drama, connection. So, through debriefing, in this case, to make connections, similarities and differences between what happens in the drama and what happens in real life. Who was I as a character and who am I as a real person? And all this leads to transformation. So my argument is that all of these things you can witness in a LARP, and you can witness it in any recreational LARP with no serious purpose, as long as there is debriefing. With no debriefing, you're missing this, so everything else collapses or is useless anyhow. And then, another interesting concept that I wanted to share, because I thought that maybe some of you would want to look it up in more detail, is recreational therapy. So, recreational therapy is a relatively new, let's say, branch of psychotherapy, of therapy in general, actually, not only psychotherapy, because it involves also, physical therapy, social therapy, etc., that has to do with any means of recreation. It can be outdoors-based psychotherapy. It can be sports-based psychotherapy. RPG-based psychotherapy is a very big branch in this field. So whoever is interested in knowing more, not only how to use LARP, but also other things that us nerds like in this context, can look this up. And I also included their website, the website of the international organization. Another quote that I like about recreation, since I was talking about recreational therapy. So the word recreation is really a very beautiful word. It is defined in the dictionary as the process of giving new life to something, of refreshing something, of restoring something. This something, of course, is the whole person. And I believe that this is the quote that, for me, describes in the best way what happens to me every time I LARP for whatever reasons. Suggested reading, useful links, and that's it. Thank you.
Questions?
Well, as you said, LARP is a very powerful tool. And even when you don't want to actually stimulate personal growth specifically, then it might happen. And what can people do to not get it wrong for other people? Because I can make a LARP because I want to hit people not in the head, but I want to hit people with a sword. Somebody comes up and opens up, and that person is actually traumatized by the event. What can we do to keep this away?
Emotional safety regulator, always.
And safety team.
Give me a job, guys. Okay. No, seriously, I want to say a few more words. Like, I think that we can all agree, based on our different experiences, that humans are the most unpredictable species in the planet. It is good, in my opinion, to have there someone that can deal with any situation that may arise, because you will not see it coming. You will not see it coming. I was talking about this a little bit with Zbigniew and Nicola yesterday, and what I told them is don't trust your judgment. Like, you go as a GM, you meet the players and you have this impression of, let's say, Irini looks like a very, contained person, not too much emotional ups and downs. You don't know her. Even if you know her for a long time, you cannot know what can be potentially triggered in Irini under a specific situation that may or may not arise. And if you yourself are not, trained or capable or willing to deal with this, let's be honest, it's not a nice job. Okay, it's not a fun thing to go and talk with a person that is crying for something that in your view was nothing. Okay, it was nothing special, nothing happened, but this person is collapsing. You think it's stupid. Well, that's why you need to have someone there who, even though he or she may also think it's stupid, he will still deal with it.
All right, so just one question about the different kind of scenarios that you... can you just give us an example about what kind of scenarios that you've used or other people have used in psychotherapy and LARP? So how, yeah, that would be... there was an example by Lucille's, so... Examples.
So I can give you an example of a scenario that I've used. So it was supposed to be a scenario that deals with existential dread, the fear of death. Okay, yes, nice theme, huh? So anyway, I created a scenario where the players were random people, not related to each other previously, that had gathered for some kind of gala or festivity, I don't know, something. And all of a sudden, the end of the world comes. Okay, so meteorites start hitting the Earth. It was very difficult to create, with the videos and music, but I think I did a good job. And anyway, so actually they spent 1.5 hours waiting to die. Okay? And this created a lot of shit. And my purpose was for this shit, because we all have that shit inside of us, whether we like it or not, to surface in a safe environment where we can actually talk about it, because we rarely do. That is an example from my work. I can also give you an example of a LARP that you can also find freely in the famous LARP, what was it, the LARP dictionary, whatever. The family Anderson. It's, do you know it? It's an excellent scenario to talk about, family relationships and guilt and all this drama and oppression within the family. This is also excellent, excellent.
Okay. I wanted to ask, I totally agree for the necessity of having like the emotional safety specialist. A question is, in case you are not available or a person with MA and years of experience in this, how much time would you need to train that specialist?
That specialist needs to be trained in psychotherapy. So if you cannot find a psychotherapist who is also a LARPer, and we are many, but if you cannot find one, you could take a psychotherapist and train him in LARP, which will take less time than to give him a 4 years training in psychotherapy.
So it's years, thank you.
This way, it's years. The other way, it's a week.
Yeah, I just these kind of scenarios sound to me very similar to kind of like more artistic Nordic scenarios, and then I just find it beautiful, like how this kind of art and therapy, which is coming from this common root of magic somewhere, it's like finding its way again.
Always, like art therapy is a very big, chapter. In any form of art, like visual arts or drama or music or even writing, and LARP, uses it all. It's like the ultimate, art form in this context.
Any more questions? Well, thank you, Elektra.
Thank you.